Many Republicans, once it's been revealed that Craig Spencer, the doctor in New York, does have Ebola, are calling for a stronger, more stringent, non-voluntary quarantine for those returning from Ebola-stricken African nations. We've got video snippets of several of them making their case. The first is Representative Chaffetz. Let's listen to him.
We're dealing with people who have a known, we're talking about people who come in direct contact with Ebola patients. Why we wouldn't hold them for a 21-day period to make sure that their loved ones, themselves, the people of this country, I don't understand why we wouldn't put that travel restriction in place, why we don't get a little bit more strict in putting quarantine. The self-quarantine didn't work. It didn't work in the case of Dr. Spencer, and he's one of the great people of this earth. I mean, he went to go help save people's lives.
Again, right off the bat, since we have no indication yet, no evidence yet that anyone else was actually exposed to the disease, it seems pretty irresponsible to say it didn't work in this case.
Right.
It might well be that it did work, that he quarantined himself at least fairly well. Nobody else was exposed that we know of yet. That would be a success, not a failure.
Well, also there's another thing about this. Remember, these are U.S. doctors and nurses that are taking time out from their regular jobs. They actually have to get a leave from the hospital that they work for in order to leave and have a job to come back to. So a 21-day voluntary automatic, or I should say mandatory would be the term for that, a mandatory quarantine of people coming back means that they're taken out of the system that much longer, and they're not there to do the kind of work that they're here to do, which is, work in our hospitals and provide the best care possible.
Yeah.
So I'm a little afraid that that ban or that imposed quarantine would discourage them further from going to work. And again, these
almost have to.
Yeah, but these are like the greatest people on earth. I mean,
Selfless, yes.
would I go to help other people with Ebola, knowing that risks my own life? I don't think I got anywhere near that kind of courage.
And
right?
there is one more thing that Chaffetz said in that hearing. He talked about why didn't that doctor just stay in, where was he that he came from?
Guinea.
Okay, so why didn't he just stay in Guinea until he was sure that he was clear? It's like, well, the whole point is you come back, and if you get it, then you get better treatment here, and you actually have a chance of survival.
Exactly.
So that also didn't make sense to me.
Why didn't you just stay there for the rest of his life? Why didn't you just move his whole family there?
Right. Now, on the other hand, I am tempted to agree with this proposal, okay? Because look, it is obviously incredibly dangerous, and it's obvious from the case of the doctor that you might have it but you don't show symptoms in the beginning, and then there is that dangerous small period of time when you first show symptoms. Again, how much do you know that you're showing symptoms at that point? That's an open question. If we had you in a quarantine situation at that point, I think a lot of us would rest easy. Now, the second, on the other hand, is we got 3,000 troops over there that we helped. We sent over to help with infrastructure, who are also heroes. When they come back, are we going to quarantine every single one of them for 21 days? But I don't think it's an easy question. Yeah. I think it's a proposal worth considering.
Okay, well, why don't we play a little bit more, see if maybe Representative Matt Cartwright can sway you, Cenk.
Mr. Lynch brought it up, Mr. Connolly brought it up, Mrs. Maloney brought it up, I believe Mr. Chaffetz brought it up. Is there any reason why we wouldn't just want to use a 21-day waiting period in West Africa before we bring people back to the United States?
Our 21-day monitoring process is done at the unit. It's done twice a day as far as whether they'll have direct contact with a healthcare professional for everybody who comes home.
Before we continue, I want to play some of Representative Blake Farenthold here, who talks specifically about what they got into in that video.
You talked about an overabundance of caution. It's why we closed the bowling alley. It's why the airline took out the seats and reupholstered and recarpeted. We're hearing a lot about an overabundance of caution. From a purely health standpoint, would an overabundance of caution include an air travel ban complete to the affected countries like we've seen in some European countries?
No, I don't believe it would.
All right, I'm going to respectfully disagree. After the 10 days in Africa, they're going to come back to the United States and go to their unit and be monitored in the unit. Between the 12 hours that they're not being monitored by their unit, are they going to be able to ride a subway, see their girlfriend, go to a bowling alley, and take an Uber?
They'll be on the military facility. They will be allowed to go home, either to the barracks or to their families, but obviously every 12 hours will limit their ability. Having to report to the unit every 12 hours will limit their ability to travel much further off base than you could go in order to get back for evening formation.
So, I mean, when you look at like a doctor who returns, who obviously is better equipped than the average soldier to diagnose himself, understands the risks a little bit more, that's a little bit clearer case than the soldiers coming back, especially in much greater numbers. Then it seems to be the case that they might have signed up for something a little bit more stringent in terms of a mandatory quarantine. And I'm not sure at that point. I think that perhaps with the soldiers, but again, I think that people who are instantly swayed by what they're saying there imagine it being 1 or 2 doctors coming back, but that's simply not going to be the case. And many cities might not be equipped for dozens and dozens of potentially unnecessary quarantines lasting 3 weeks.
My biggest problem with what they're proposing is the travel ban, because I think it's indicative of what their solution is to every problem, right? Like, oh, our state is very right-wing, so we want to secede. Oh, this is a problem in West Africa, so we want to isolate it. Everything is about isolating things, right? And it's not... I mean, how many times do you have to hear experts say this is not the right way to go? If you do a travel ban, people who want to get to and from West Africa are going to do it anyway, right? It's going to be more difficult to actually track the people who are traveling to West Africa and then coming back to the United States. If you want to monitor them, this is the wrong way to go. And also, it doesn't solve the problem to isolate it in one particular region of the world, right? It's going to lead to wars. It's going to lead to a lack of humanitarian effort toward that region of the world. It's a disaster. When it comes to the issue of a mandatory quarantine, I think it's a lot more nuanced than Republicans think. It's a lot more nuanced than people who completely disagree with Republicans. I agree. You can't really have a knee-jerk reaction to that either. You have to really weigh the pros and cons of it.
All right, let's decide it on the panel. Come on. Okay.
I don't know.
I'm torn. I'm with Anna.
Yeah.
I'm torn.
15
days. Are you against the mandatory quarantine?
I'm against a mandatory quarantine. Yeah, I think it should be a voluntary. It should be suggested. It should be people that are going to be monitored so that we don't actually cause things to shut down because of this overwhelming urge to force everybody to mandatory quarantine.
So one of the reasons I continue to be split is, look, yes, we're way overreacting here. And for example, as John pointed out earlier, we way underreacted to the AIDS epidemic, and now AIDS kills far more people. Again, the stat that I am amazed by, AIDS kills more people every single day than Ebola has killed in its entire run. Okay, so we underreact. I wish we had overreacted to AIDS in the same way in the beginning. So quarantine, I'm open to it. John, what do you think?
I think perhaps, as I said, something with the military, perhaps I think that they have signed on for a slightly different level of freedom to access the outside world. I mean, that's their standard operating mode when you're in the military. And considering it's such a huge number of people, they tend to be on the younger side. I think that then having some sort of, perhaps not 21-day, some sort of quarantine that's mandatory perhaps makes sense if they're coming directly back from there. But as you alluded to much earlier, we desperately need resources and manpower going over there to deal with this. And being shut off from the world for 3 weeks afterward, I don't know if many doctors would be willing to do that. It's already hard enough. I mean, they made the movie Outbreak about doctors who specifically did this, who went to Africa to help with Ebola. Those were movie heroes, and people like Craig Spencer are already doing that. They're already shouldering so much cost and inconvenience. To put an additional 3 weeks on, I don't know that it's feasible.
All right, I have a conclusion, which is that we have a rare situation where we will not reach a conclusion on the Young Turks. You know why? Because I was going to vote, and then I was like, I don't know. I'd have to talk to a lot more doctors.
Yeah.
Right?
And it'd have to be designed specifically with some detail and some attention to science and what would actually work.
I think that Farenthold is half-assing it. If he really wants us to be protected, a travel ban's not enough. I think we should get a gigantic glass shell over the United States. Or perhaps we dig it up and we float it a couple hundred yards above the rest of the Earth, and we just float on by the rest of the disease-stricken population.
I have a different idea. I think maybe we can convince Farenthold and other Republicans to not do these bans by reminding them that the Egyptians had a ban on Moses and his people. Okay, it was a bit of a travel ban, right? But Moses crossed the border anyway.